It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce Jill LaMorie, who is the Director of Professional Education for the Tragedy Assistance Programs for Survivors, better known as TAPS. TAPS is a wonderful organization that has been helping veterans for many, many years, and it was founded by Bonnie Carroll following the tragic death of her husband, Brigadier General Tom Carroll, in an Army C-2 plane crash in 1992. What TAPS does is it provides ongoing emotional help, hope, and healing to all who are grieving the death of a loved one in military service to America. Regardless of the relationship to the deceased, geography, or circumstance of death, TAPS meets its mission by providing peer-based support, crisis care, casualty casework assistance, and grief and trauma resources. We're very proud to call them a partner in this very, very noble work that we do. With that, I will turn the podium over to Jill LaMorie.
I'd like to thank the Kristin Brooks Hope Foundation as well as Chase Community Giving. There is definitely a sea of goodwill out there, and as a veteran service nonprofit organization, we'd like to thank all our partnerships in trying to prevent the most tragic, one of the most tragic of all deaths, suicide. Since 1775, men and women of the United States have raised their hand to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, and there are families who serve beside them. For each person that loses his or her life to suicide, conservative estimates are that 6 persons close to the deceased are directly affected. Whether the death is by direct or indirect acts of self-destruction, suicide is more commonly experienced as a sudden traumatic loss, with an often stigmatizing grief, which makes suicide survivors more vulnerable to a prolonged and complicated grief process. If the death is unanticipated and violent in nature, suicide loss survivors also have an increased danger of developing post-traumatic stress disorder. Those bereaved by suicide also are at a higher risk for attempting and completing suicide themselves. With the alarming increase in the rate of suicide amongst active duty U.S. military personnel, and with the health of the force as a stated major priority by the Department of Defense, it is time to recognize that friends, families, loved ones, and children of those in the military who die by suicide need our help as well. The Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, otherwise known as TAPS, has been meeting this mission. And we need help meeting this mission with the increasing rates of suicide amongst our military personnel. Our families are affected. Their mental health has been compromised. Our families seem to have been forgotten. The history of the self-help peer support movement has taught us that groups who are stigmatized, traumatized, ill, and disenfranchised have banded together to heal and support one another while becoming stakeholders in their own care, very much like the Vet-to-Vet program. TAPS emerged in 1994 as a peer-based emotional support program for anyone grieving the death of a loved one in military service to America. Bonnie Carroll, a military widow, founded TAPS and developed an unprecedented national network of individuals who could, through peer-based programs, connect with and support one another in their own grief. In 2005, TAPS began to see an increase in the number of survivors of military suicide, seeking grief and trauma peer support services. They wanted to talk to another person, another mom, another wife, another child, another friend, another battle buddy who had lost someone to suicide. The majority of these survivors experienced stigma, both in the military and the civilian community, which caused significant interference with a healthy grieving process. The stigma of their service members' mental illness and suicide had cut them off from their support systems, leaving them alone to struggle with the chaos of suicide and vulnerable to suicide themselves. As the rise in suicides have increased in the military, a dramatically large increase of military families and survivors have reached out to TAPS. With special consideration for the needs of suicide loss survivors, TAPS has built a peer-based program specifically designed for the healing process of those bereaved by suicide in the military. One of the great assets TAPS has provided to both the survivor and the military community is its postvention services. These services have had direct impact on suicide prevention in both uniformed personnel and survivors of military suicide support loss. Communal support and peer mentoring provide the benefit of monitoring military suicide loss survivors. Another survivor who knows what it feels like to want to die, to join their loved one, can sense that in another survivor. Peers are able to build bridges of trust and mutual in-the-same-boat understandings, which outsiders of the community cannot, and those who don't understand the military culture cannot. There is a benefit of peers monitoring each other for symptoms of suicide. Peer groups increase social support, which reduces the stigma, while simultaneously promoting peer role models who can provide an understanding of this complex journey for grieving and at-risk survivors. TAPS has many peer-based programs. We can be reached 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have a national 24-hour crisis line. We provide peer-to-peer telephone service and in-person support. And this year we'll be hosting our second annual Suicide Loss Survivors Conference, October 7th to the 10th of 2010 here in Alexandria, Virginia. Participants are offered formal sessions which emphasize peer support, education, spirituality, and remembrance. Informally, the setting provides a safe, supportive place surrounded by peers where survivors can begin to open up and heal. In closing, the health of military service members, their families, and their surviving families matter. After the flag is folded and the day turns to dusk, the suicide death of a military service member not only profoundly affected their life, but also those they loved and left behind. The TAPS community of military suicide loss survivors is helping to teach each other how to heal, while also healing itself. It is with the power of peer support that TAPS has harnessed the strength, courage, and resiliency of survivors to reach out to one another, to prevent further suicide in military families, and to share in the commonality of their grief. Thank you for your time, and for further information you can contact us at TAPS. Thank you.